Live, local, and number one. Canterbury Mornings with Chris Lynch. Weekdays from 8:30 to midday on Newstalk ZB 100.1 FM.
Well, in developing news this morning, the UN is meeting now over allegations of a chemical weapon massacre in Syria. One that can't be verified and is denied, of course, by the Assad regime. Opposition activist Khalid Salin says the attack claimed the lives of 1,300 people, many of them children.
It's very obvious to us that these chemical weapons were used and were carried out using ballistic missiles. Only the regime has that capability, has the willingness to use them against innocent civilians.
But in an interesting turn of events this morning, the regime has put up an unnamed military official to dismiss these claims.
The leadership of the army confirms these allegations are completely false and are part of the dirty media war that is led by some countries through the media against Syria.
Now, this government says the claims are fabricated. This is, of course, the Syrian government, although the army has certainly launched an offensive around the capital. To discuss this morning is Ali Akil from the Syrian Solidarity Organisation. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you for your time this morning. Do you believe that the Assad regime is capable of chemical warfare massacre?
Certainly. They have shown their readiness to kill civilians right from the beginning of this revolution, going back 2.5 years when peaceful protests were in the streets, and the response was immediately killing these civilians by snipers and tanks and various other methods. So there is no question that this regime is brutal enough to kill as many civilians as necessary in their view. That's one point. The other point is they are the only ones who actually hold chemical weapons, and thirdly, they are the only ones who actually have the expertise to operate such a large-scale chemical weapon attack. On top of all of that, the actual chemical weapon investigation team, the United Nations Chemical Weapons Investigation Team, is right there in Syria, and we are asking them and asking the UN, and if the regime is not the one who's done it, well, let them prove it. Let them go and access the areas, and they will be able to tell who has done it and whether it was done.
So in your mind, Ali, there is absolutely no question the Syrian government is behind this attack?
There is no question whatsoever.
When you first knew of this information, your initial reaction?
It was another heartbreaking, devastating news to hear. Unfortunately, we have come used to really devastating news, but this one in particular was even more devastating. I mean, yes, this regime has been brutal all the way along. Yes, it has actually used chemical weapons more than once before, but this is the first time that they have used chemical weapons in such a scale and in a such highly populated civilian area. And has the massive numbers in casualties amongst children and women and civilians.
UK Foreign Secretary William Hague said if it is confirmed the attacks would mark a shocking escalation in the use of chemical weapons in Syria. Do you fear this could be the start of more attacks to come?
That is what we all certainly fear, and that's why the world has to come together and put an end to this. I mean, there's the red line that nobody should be able to cross. The US and various others have always talked about red lines being the chemical weapons. Well, chemical weapons have been used, but even to this scale, and there is nothing that they can even wait for. If they're going to act at all before the total destruction of the whole Middle East, then they have to actually move and act now and immediately. The humanitarian crisis in Syria has already been the largest crisis in the most recent history for humanity, and this is according to the UN. And so the world has to come together and put an end to this.
The images, Ali, as you know, are quite frankly shocking and disturbing when we see images of young children lining hospital corridors, bodies dead, destruction everywhere. And I guess it was important to have you on this program this morning because we can no longer think that we are isolated from the devastation and the sheer vileness of this regime, even here in New Zealand.
Absolutely. We have a Syrian community here who I'm one of them, and I'm on daily basis stress when there is a sudden cut in the internet, for example, or when I hear about certain attacks in certain areas, and I fear for my own relatives back in Syria. And that's the same for so many, or almost all Syrians in New Zealand, but that's not the only thing. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all fellow humans, and we certainly in New Zealand felt a little bit better when we had some aid from other countries, when we had the Christchurch earthquake, for example. And now the scale of the Christchurch earthquake is nothing in comparison to the Syrian crisis, yet Syria has been left alone to face these crises. There are organizations in New Zealand who are working to help in the Syrian case. Some of them have just started. Some of them are better off. I've actually attended on the International Humanitarian Day, which was Monday, the 19th of August. I attended a conference that had a number of these organizations, including Amnesty International and Red Cross and Tear Fund and others, and of course Syrian Solidarity New Zealand, whom I was representing. We all agree that the crisis in Syria is something that is unprecedented, and it takes the world to come together to recover, basically, or to make an end to this, or to just reduce the crisis. I mean, I'm running out of words. It's so devastating. It's such a massive scale crisis that it can't be even described.
Have you had a chance to speak with your relatives in Syria? Are they okay, Ali?
Luckily they are. Most of my relatives are actually in Aleppo in the north, and so this particular chemical weapon attack would have not directly impacted them, but all of them, or the majority of them, are also displaced due to the ongoing crisis. Everybody in Syria is actually suffering. It only differs in terms of how much they are suffering.
Well, Ali Akil, I really appreciate your time this morning. My very best wishes to you.
Thank you very much.